Today is World Sepsis Day, and I want to tell you about the time that I nearly died and I had to bring both myself and my business back from the dead, literally. 7 years ago this year, I nearly died of pneumonia and sepsis. When I tell you it was one of the biggest shocks of my entire life, that is a total understatement. It was the middle of November. Being a jeweler, artist maker, I was right slap bang in the middle of my Christmas making madness. I had around 9 pretty intense custom jewellery orders on, all of which needed to go out by Christmas. My workshop husband and I were in the middle of trying to set our studio up so that we could do our Christmas events, decorate it, redo our cabinets. I was trying to get organised for Christmas, buying the packaging that I needed, supplies. If you're an artist maker, you'll know exactly the type of pressure that comes around Christmas. It started with a cold, nothing more than that, sore throat. That was pretty much it. But over the course of a week, it nosedived pretty dramatically, and every time it got worse, I kept thinking, oh, now I've got a bad cold, now I've got the flu. And it ended up with me being totally comatose in my bed. And what I mean by that is that I couldn't move. I felt like I was literally pinned in the bed. I felt so unwell that I thought I was going to die. I was swapping between being so hot that I was drenched in sweat and sweat the entire bed, which is totally unlike me. At the same time, I was so cold that I was dressed like an onion with a vest, pajamas, a big woolly dressing gown, the hood up, socks on, shivering in the bed. My mum suggested at one point that I should really go to the hospital. Now, what should really have alerted us to the fact that I was more unwell than usual was the fact that I wasn't talking. I physically could not speak. And I would say if you've been following me and you know me as a mentor, you will know that I love to talk, but I physically could not get the words out and all I could do was grunt. Anyway, long story short, I went to the hospital. They completely missed the signs. After waiting 5 hours in A&E, I had a grumpy doctor who literally didn't want to talk to us and asked us to leave after 5 minutes of seeing him and totally dismissed my symptoms and sent me home. I deteriorated within 15 minutes of leaving the hospital, persevering for a few more hours, eventually going back. If I hadn't gone back the second time, I would be dead. There are only 2 ways out of sepsis. One is you survive it, one is you die. There is no in between. This knowledge alone haunted me for many years. Thankfully, I responded well to the drugs and medication. And although I was sent home, I was far from well. In fact, what I didn't realise at the time, that going home was only the start of my survival journey. Because I was under the age of 60, even though I was in my 40s at the time, I was told that I would bounce back and recover because I was young. I didn't. Now, being a really busy person, 2 small children, running a busy business, this was just as shocking as surviving death. I pretty much ended up being bedbound for the next 3 to 6 months and housebound for a full year. It then took me another year to work out how to get out of the house and how to get back into my studio and do a step-by-step progress back to work. When you run your own business, business still ticks on. I had people that could have helped me make the work that I had on. The lovely customers that I had at the time were all willing to wait, except we didn't realise that waiting was going to be months. Because it was at Christmas time, I had spent a lot of money on a credit card up front buying the materials that I needed for the orders that I had on, buying my Christmas supplies, buying my packaging, which I would always do at that time of year because I knew that I had money coming in. And with my custom work, with stage payments, I knew that that money was already covered, except I didn't expect to nearly die. All of a sudden, I obviously had a large amount of debt. The bank didn't care. I still had business bills to pay. Bills don't care if you're unwell. They're still going to tick on and be pulled out of your account. And so I had to try and use the knowledge that I already had in business and work out, how am I going to get my business through this year? I can either quit, take some time off. At that point, I didn't realize that if I was going to take time off, it would be years, not a few weeks or a few months. And so really I was taking it one day at a time. I used my Money Monday mantra and I went through all my expenses and I axed anything that I didn't need. What I also did was cancelled all my bank cards. This is a little genius tip, because what happens when you cancel your bank cards, any payments going out via that card don't automatically get stopped. They'll send you a notification that, oh, this failed. This is also really good for finding things that you've forgotten about that maybe you have on auto renew. That came in really handy because it instantly stopped everything and gave me some time to cancel things and decide on really scaling everything down to the bare minimum. I borrowed enough money off my mum to cover a couple of months of bills and pay the big credit card bill that I have. This gave me a few months breathing room to not have to freak out because my brain did not work. Literally, my brain did not work. I was brain dead for a while. I realised that I was so unwell that I couldn't even sit up in the bed and hold a laptop on my knee. I was so weak that I couldn't even sit in the bed. I lay in the bed for like 3 months. I couldn't watch the TV. I couldn't read. The TV was too loud. I couldn't really even have the children in the room for long periods of time because it was too noisy. And I really just ended up lying there. And all I could do was think, well, as much as I could think with the brain fog that I had. In the March of the following year, it was my birthday, and I bought myself a new iPad because I'd lost my other iPad to one of the children. And the iPad was the only thing that I could hold because I could hold that lying down. And I put a plan in place about how was I going to get my business through the rest of the year. Now, as I said, I could have just quit and said I'm not doing it, but I didn't come from that sort of background to quit. I rarely quit. My attitude is, how can I adapt to survive? And I literally adapted to survive, both myself and my business. And I worked out how I could use social media to promote my work, try to sell the work that I already had made. I had work already made in my studio. I couldn't go into the studio. There were some days I couldn't get up and get dressed. So my work husband agreed that he would be happy if I sold a piece to deal with the client and wrap the piece up. And that is how I ran my business for the year and was able to make enough money to cover the remaining business bills for a full year. I adapted to survive, and then I had to take the next year another step at a time. When I say that I have seen it all in my business, I really mean that. My business and myself have been through just about everything you could imagine. I'm telling you this story because one of my core beliefs is that we have to adapt to survive. If your business isn't working, you have to work out why it isn't working. You have to adapt it and move on. If you aren't working or you're not happy doing what you're doing, you need to adapt, stop, have a think about what you're doing, think about what you want to do, put a plan in place and move on. How can I help you adapt and survive?